Tigard City Council for our business meeting. City Recorder Krager, please call roll.
Councilor Wolf.
Here.
Council President Hu.
Here.
Mayor Liu.
Here.
Youth Councilor Vogel.
Here.
Councilor Shaw.
Here. Thank you. If everyone will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. City Council or city teammates, any non-agenda items this evening?
Evening, Mayor. No non-agenda items. I just want to reference a few changes that we're bringing forward for the council's aware, but for our community. We are recommending that the item number 8, the Downtown Tigard Reimagined final report, that we move this to the July 16th meeting. The same for item 9, which you'll do some of the formal continuations until the July 16th meeting. And then the item number 10, the briefing on River Terrace Community Plan Kickoff, moving that to June 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing nothing additional, we will move on to public comment. If you'd like to call in now, please do so to get in the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And we have Assistant City Manager Trich with follow-up to previous public comment.
Mayor, I don't believe there was any follow-up, so.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay. There was no written comments.
Just for clarity, there are no public comments to follow up.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. There's only a few people here. Is anyone signed up to speak in person? No. Okay. Seeing none. Mr. Vang, are there any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to comment by video tonight?
There are no callers.
Okay. We sort of rushed along, so if for any reason someone pops on, please feel free to let me know. We will move on to the City Manager report with City Manager Reimer.
Well, thank you again, Mayor. Evening, Mayor, councilors, members of the community, and my teammates that are here. I want to start by thanking the Tigard community for the overwhelming support that they provided for both of our ballot measures. As the council knows, that was a long process that took many people, including our teammates, council support, community members support, and many others to make sure that our community was aware and educated on each of those measures. And we think it showed with the results that we had, which were as strong as any in the region and the state. So just a huge shout out again to the community for their support and for really standing forward for our public safety needs, as well as for the charter that we brought forward that will really help guide our government into the future. So thank you, Tigard. Just a few quick updates in addition to that. Along the way, we've talked about our AARP tax aid volunteers at the library during tax season. The final numbers are in. We served 914 community members. And I don't think I've ever seen this before. We also have a cumulative refunds of over $800,000 they received. So we learned that as well from AARP. So nice work at the library and for the volunteers that help us in that area. Also at the library, you may be aware that our community can recommend books and movies and other materials. And another stat that Halstead and team have shared is since the end of 2021, we have received almost 1,500 suggestions or just about 1.5 suggestions a day on materials that our community would like to see. So a lot of engagement there. And then it's that time of year where summer reading begins at the library starting on June 1st. So kids, teens, and adults can stop by to pick up the reading log and a free book. And we'll start in that process. I believe it goes through the end of August. So June 1st to August 31st. And that concludes my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda, which is used for routine items, including minutes and approval of contracts or intergovernmental agreements. Information on each item is available on the city's website in the packet for this meeting. Items may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Council members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. On the consent agenda today is an IGA with ODOT, which is just a bunch of fancy government speak, an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation for the 95th Avenue Highway 217 pedestrian and bike bridge refinement study for Oregon Community Pass Grant. Are there any questions or a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda as presented.
I second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved by unanimous vote of the council. The next item on the agenda is the appointments to the Tigard Youth Advisory Council. I am excited to have Faith Lee and Kailani Rue, who are here in person. I did some interviews with them 2 weeks ago, and both are outstanding students in our community who are really excited to be a part of our Tigard Youth Advisory Council. They have been participating before or are really passionate about some mental health projects going forward. So we would love to have them on the Youth Council. Maddie, is there anything you'd like to add? Or, I'm sorry, Youth Councilor Vogel.
Nothing else, just thank you guys so much. Kai's been doing amazing work these last few months, and Faith's gonna do amazing too, so I'm super excited.
Excellent. Are there any questions or a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 24-12.
I'll second the motion.
Will the city recorder read the number and title of the resolution?
Resolution number 24-12, a resolution appointing Faith Lee and Kailani Rue as members to the Tigard Youth Advisory Council.
Youth Councilor Vogel, will you give an advisory vote?
Yes.
Thank you. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. Congratulations. You are welcome to come up. We have a fancy little thing. We can take a picture. It's super fun. I also have some Tigard pins for you. So would you like to say anything? You also don't have to. Thank you for your votes. Spoken like a good politician. Well done. The next item on our agenda is a briefing on Greenberg Road and the Tiedemann Avenue study. And we have Principal Engineer Furman to present the item. Welcome. Can you just turn it on? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Good evening. We're really happy to be here and share about this project. So we've been working hard over the past year and a half.
Could you move the mic a little bit
yes,
closer to
sorry.
you? Thank you.
We've been working hard over the past year and a half on this project. And this is a project that came out of as a high priority out of the transportation system plan. And so I have here Susie Wright, who is the project manager on the consultant team. And she's just going to be going over an overview of everything we've been up to with the project, and then we can answer any questions that you guys have. So I'll hand it up.
Great, thank you. Yeah, good evening. Susie Wright with Kittleson and Associates. Okay, how do I advance? Do I have the ability to advance slides, or
No, I think you just.
who do I communicate with? Carol. All right, next slide, please. That's no problem. And are you guys, do you have screens in front of you as well? Okay, great. All right. Well, this project is it was named the Tiedemann Avenue Multimodal Study. What it really resulted in was a concept design for Tiedemann Avenue from at the south end from Walnut Street all the way to the north at Greenberg Road. The goals of our project were to come up with a preferred cross-section for the road for that entire area. Good portions of the corridor kind of lacking sidewalks, bike lanes, safe crossings, etc. So our other goal was to come up with a cross-section and then improve pedestrian and bicycle connectivity to the nearby trails. If you can see, the orange lines in the map really show the different trail systems kind of crisscrossing and providing access, or Tiedemann Avenue providing access to Fano Creek Trail at North Dakota, at Tigard Street, and then where it crosses down near Dirksen Park. And we also have the Heritage Trail connecting in near the railroad tracks, and with Tigard Street also having a very short connection. So we're really wanting to fill in the gaps in the street network, kind of connecting all these trails. And as part of that, improve traffic operations all the way up at the north end at Greenberg Road, where it's very closely spaced with North Dakota. Sometimes it can be difficult to get out onto Tiedemann Avenue from North Dakota during the busy times of day, although the drivers are generally pretty polite, making it work and giving people space to get in and out. But that, coupled with the railroad tracks and sometimes some long queues there, we're definitely wanting to look at options to improve safety and operations there, as well as at Tigard Street and Tiedemann, which is currently an all-way stop, which does seem to function pretty well. It can have some long queues during the peak hours, but overall operating okay. But we wanted to look at it well into the future and understand what its needs were. Next slide, please. So as part of the process, we first developed alternatives to address the issues at the intersections and for cross-sections throughout the corridor. We evaluated those with using evaluation criteria as well as public outreach. We had an online survey and a pretty well-attended in-person open house at Fowler Middle School. We then selected a preferred alternative and then started to apply that to each segment of the corridor, because each segment ultimately ended up with a little bit of variations of our preferred cross-section. So we ultimately developed 10% and then 30% design plans and a cost estimate so that the city can use this for advancing the project to final design once funding is secured. Next slide, please. So I mentioned some of the process. In public involvement, we had an online survey last February, and we had an open house, as I mentioned, last April. We had 2 presentations to the Tigard Transportation Advisory Committee, and the city updated the project website very regularly and also sent out flyers and school newsletters for some of the events that we had. Next slide, please. So some of what we heard during that outreach, so on the online survey, we had 173 responses, and we were trying to get kind of hear what people were looking for in that corridor and what kinds of facilities they felt were most appropriate. And we got strong response and interest in having a multi-use path or a buffered bike lane on both sides of the street with some preference for a multi-use path. We also had preference for a multi-use path or buffered sidewalk over a extra wide sidewalk or standard sidewalk. We definitely heard a lot of concerns about speeding on Tiedemann. We heard a desire for really designing for children, given the proximity to Fowler and Dirksen Park and just its connectivity and providing access to the trail system. And we also heard concern about making sure we're able to maintain the existing on-street parking near Fowler Middle School's track that provides a lot of parking for Dirksen Park and trail access. Next slide, please. At the open house, we had about 25 attendees, and it was, I would say, very well attended from residents along the corridor, which was great. They were able to weigh in on some of the cross-section alternatives as well as the intersection alternatives. And we kind of continue to see strong support for multi-use paths along the corridor on both sides, strong support for roundabouts at both study intersections. We did end up with a roundabout as a preferred option at one of the two intersections, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But we did also hear concerns from residents about right-of-way impacts, and I'll talk about that as I get into each segment of the project. Next slide, please. So through that engagement process and trying to understand what folks were kind of desiring for the corridor, mentioned that we heard a strong preference for multi-use paths. So that became part of our preferred cross-section. You'll notice up there, the top cross-section is the city's standard cross-section for a collector like Tiedemann. Bike lanes in each direction, and a landscape buffer, providing some buffer to the sidewalk. But based on the input we received, as well as some right-of-way constraints in the corridor, we ended up with a preferred cross-section for the corridor with multi-use paths, so shared facility for people walking and people biking on both sides of the street with a buffer where possible. And this actually resulted in a 55-foot cross-section, which is a few feet smaller or narrower than the typical section, and it also kind of results in a narrower roadway, which can help address speeds in the corridor. Kind of bringing that curb in instead of having it behind a bike lane just naturally helps slow traffic in the corridor. We did end up modifying this preferred cross-section a little bit for each segment of the corridor based on some of its individual constraints and opportunities and needs, and I'll talk about that here in the next couple slides. Next slide, please. So kind of taking you through the kind of 3, maybe 4 segments of the corridor from south to north. Segment 1 has a section from Walnut Street to the Fano Creek Trail crossing. It's a pretty typical section, and some of it has on-street parking. Segment 2 is from the Fano Creek Trail crossing north to Tigard Street. It's our most constrained as far as existing right-of-way goes segment. And then segment 3 is from Tigard Street north to the railroad tracks, and segment 4 is from the railroad tracks up to Greenberg. Next slide, please. So these next few slides just have a few pictures just to kind of spur your mind of what this looks like today and the existing conditions. This is at the existing Fano Creek Trail crossing and near Fowler Middle School. And in this photo in the lower right, you can kind of see some of the on-street parking. It's not being used much in this photo, but many times it's very full on both sides of the road and even spilling into bike lanes, which is another good reason to get the bike lanes off the street and up onto the sidewalk so they won't be restricted at times by people parking where they shouldn't be. Next slide, please. So in this section, segment 1, Walnut to Fano Creek, you'll see in the top there's a preferred cross-section, which does fit in part of this segment, and there's actually a wider right-of-way because of the existing on-street parking in some of it, and the lower cross-section there is the cross-section that we'll be providing kind of where there is parking today. And we're able to maintain almost all of the existing parking today. We ended up eliminating a few spots to improve sight distance at the trail crossing. And we're looking at an enhanced crossing at 106th Drive, which is right in the middle of the segment, kind of teeing into about where the Fowler Middle School track is, and it's a very popular safe routes to school route. Let's see, next slide, please. So segment 2 from the Fano Creek Bridge north to Tigard Street. As I mentioned, this is a pretty constrained section. This is a segment today where there really is no sidewalk or no bike lane on either side. There's some very limited paved shoulder, but mostly walking paths off the paved area. Next slide, please. So in this area, some of the existing right-of-way is as narrow as 40 feet. It kind of ranges from 40 to 45 feet. And there's a lot of driveways in this segment as well. So the preferred cross-section shown at the top, kind of preferred typical section for the corridor is about 55 feet wide. We've come up with a preferred cross-section for this segment that's a little bit narrower. It's 50 feet wide, which essentially to do that, we've eliminated the buffer strip in this area and provided an extra 1.5 feet on each side for the multi-use path. And this helps kind of limit the right-of-way acquisition that would be needed in this segment, and really allows us to kind of maintain all of the existing homes with an appropriate setback to code for their driveways in front of their garages and so forth. Next slide, please. So segment 3 is from Tigard Street north to North Dakota Street. It goes over the railroad tracks. Today, there's a crossing of the railroad tracks only on one side only. It's the east side. There's kind of a meandering sidewalk on one side, that same side as well. Here you can see it kind of going behind this large tree, and this is approximately where the Heritage Trail comes in as well. Next slide, please. So in this segment, so kind of continuing that preferred cross-section shown at the top, is the preferred, are kind of a little bit more constrained. There's going to be portions of this segment that we will have to continue that cross-section from the segment just south of here, where we have a little bit wider trail on both sides, but without the buffer. Some areas we can have the buffer on one side, so it kind of varies a little bit on this segment. For this segment, as well as segment 2, we did identify kind of if necessary, as we advance into the next stage of the project, kind of depending how kind of the right-of-way discussions go, it is possible to kind of have a multi-use path on one side only if necessary. We did look at that, but that definitely is not was not preferred and is not part of the 30% design plan, but it's something that could be kind of used as a contingency as the project moves forward. See, next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk about the two kind of big intersections on the corridor. This is a drone photo of Greenberg Road, where Tiedemann comes in, and you'll see North Dakota is kind of on the right-hand side coming in. This photo north is kind of upside down. But some of the challenges at this intersection when you're at Greenberg Road, which is the larger street kind of going north, up and down. In this picture, there's no crosswalk on one of the crossings, basically the crossing that's closest coming from the Cascade and 217 side. This intersection, operates acceptably, the signal does, but North Dakota, the unsignalized approach there half a block away, is failing during the peak hours. And there's some very challenging kind of left turns for North Dakota. And as it relates to the bike travel on Greenberg, the really high right turning volume from Greenberg to Tiedemann makes a challenging situation for cyclists to cross that heavy right turn lane to continue on the corridor. Next slide, please. So to address some of that, we looked at a pretty large variety of alternatives at this intersection, from restricting movements at North Dakota to kind of get rid of some of the unsafe movements, where traffic would then have to reroute through the neighborhood to come out either at Tigard Street or all the way at 121st, kind of reroute their trip for kind of assuming restricted movements at that intersection. That was one of the options. It was not the preferred option. We looked at a traffic signal, which ultimately did become the preferred option. And we also looked at a roundabout, kind of a very, what we call a dual roundabout, that would encompass both Greenberg and North Dakota at Tiedemann, kind of a two intersection roundabout. It had some pretty severe right-of-way impacts, but also kind of challenging for folks trying to continue on Greenberg, because they would be kind of really diverted all the way around this double roundabout in order to continue on the corridor. And it's a bus corridor, and so there's just a variety of factors that pointed to the signal being the preferred option. Next slide, please. So the next intersection I'll talk about is the Tigard Street Tiedemann intersection. It's currently an all-way stop. And it has kind of a lack of bike and ped facilities approaching it. It has some very close driveways at the northwest and southeast corners. Again, sorry, this drone photo is kind of upside down. North is down in this photo. And the west approach of Tigard Street comes in at a pretty significant skew, which makes it a little bit challenging for both a roundabout or a signal. And we did look at both options, roundabout and signal. We've ultimately included the roundabout as the preferred option in this intersection. That west skewed leg kind of needs to be realigned very similarly for both the signal or the roundabout option. So that wasn't a real distinguishing factor. But some of the driveways for what looks like two homes on both kind of kitty corner here at this intersection, but they're really both operating as businesses. So that was a kind of a key factor in us looking at the different options at this intersection, how to maintain their driveways and relocate them. Next slide, please. So I kind of talked through all the alternatives we looked at there, kind of just enhancing the crosswalks, adding north and southbound left turn lanes, traffic signal with and without turn lanes, etc., or a roundabout. Next slide, please. So some of the evaluation criteria that we looked at for kind of picking the cross sections as well as looking at the intersection treatments were costs and impacts, connectivity, community support, user experience, safety, and then traffic operations when it came to the intersection treatments. Next slide, please. So sorry, this is getting a little bit repeated, but ultimately our kind of preferred section is shown there at the top. It's a 55-foot cross-section with multi-use paths on both sides with buffers. That does vary throughout the corridor. In some portions, as I said, we have on-street parking where it exists today. And then in our constrained right-of-way sections, we'll be kind of reducing that landscape buffer, but widening the path to still provide some extra space and buffer from traffic for people walking and biking. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of drawing of the signalized preferred option at Tiedemann in North Dakota near Greenberg. So the signal would remain at Greenberg as well, but we would be adding a signal at North Dakota. We'd be doing a little bit of widening in that section to add a right turn lane for folks to get from Tiedemann to North Dakota, and really to help those two traffic signals function in very close proximity. We did a lot of traffic simulation and modeling to make sure that these two signals could operate acceptably together and really and function well. We found this to be the best option in order to maintain kind of full access to North Dakota and allow people to make all movements, walking, biking, and driving safely. And this visualization on the right-hand side is at a slightly different angle than the concept drawing on the left, but it is also Tiedemann in North Dakota with the intersection of Greenberg would be on the bottom side of that visual. You can see the railroad crossing in the background there on the upper side of the graphic. Next slide, please. This is a drawing and visualization of the Tigard Street Tiedemann Avenue preferred option, which is I think I said previously is a roundabout. The challenges we have with this intersection do relate to driveways for the properties in the northwest and southeast corners. The property in the northwest corner, we can consolidate and kind of do our best to, northwest corner, have plans to consolidate its kind of driveways to just north of the intersection along Tiedemann. And we think that would still kind of function with how their site is currently operated and how that house operates as a kind of office, is connected with the landscape business. The property on the southeast corner is a little bit more challenging. It's still looks like a traditional residential home, but it does have a lot of trucks and trailers, potentially from a landscaping business that park there kind of nightly, and where we would need to relocate its driveway on Tigard Street wouldn't give them proper access to their existing garage. And so you'll see here in the lower left-hand corner what we're showing in that roundabout, kind of shown a pull-through driveway for that property. So they would have access both on Tiedemann Avenue, south of the roundabout, and on Tigard Street, east of the roundabout, so they could pull through their driveway with a variety of trucks and trailers, but traditional pull-in, reverse out of the garage would be hindered. Okay, next slide. Because of that, we have alternative design for that intersection, which is a traffic signal. For the property on the northwest corner, the site access would be impacted pretty similarly, although they might also be able to have a driveway both on Tigard Street and Tiedemann. And then you can see for the property on the southeast corner, it would have one kind of larger driveway on Tigard Street in a very similar location to where they have it today. Next slide, please. So we did do a visualization of the whole corridor, and it is available in a video on the project website. These are a couple screen captures from a couple of the kind of key locations. We've got the Fano Creek Trail crossing shown in the upper left here. On the right-hand side, this would be a raised intersection at 106th, which is kind of right near Fowler Middle School, with RFB protected crossings at this location. Next slide, please. And so to kind of see more of the final design, you can look at the story map that's online on the city's project website. There's you can kind of scroll through and see a lot of existing and proposed visualizations, like shown on the right-hand side here. And, several spots in the corridor, you can kind of see the before and after. And then there is also an embedded video that kind of flies through the whole corridor and shows you the proposed condition. Next slide, please. I think that might be the last slide. Yeah. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Council President Hu, I know that you were very interested in the street too.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much. I was at that April open house. I live right there, so yeah, and so I'm very excited about this project coming, and I agree that with your feedback that from residents that I bike and walk there quite a bit, and currently segment 1 is okay, you know, as long as I can bike safely to Fano Creek Trail, but segment 2 and 3, I will not dare to go there too often on my bike. It's just too dangerous. So I'm very excited about this, and I really appreciate city teammate doing incremental changes, you know, like putting flash beacons and minor changes, but those are limited and they're cheaper but limited. So this will really go a long way of encouraging people like me to, bike further and walk further. And so I'm very excited about it. So looking forward to see what's to come next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there additional, Councillor Shaw?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just wanted to reiterate, I know I'm the liaison counsel of the Tigard Transportation Advisory Committee, and we just met a couple weeks ago, and they're also very excited about both the traffic operation improvements, but also the bike and pedestrian and the parking that will be continued and enabled for those areas. So just want to say thank you very much to both the teammates, but also to Kittleson. Thank you.
Thanks. Youth Councillor Vogel?
Yeah, thank you so much. I just had a quick question about like the public involvement. Was there any student involvement in that? Because I think for me what came to mind is like the walking and biking to school, since that's so central around Fowler, if their input was taken, and then if not, like if that was something you guys would be interested in doing just in the like improvement of this process.
Yeah, maybe I'll let Courtney address this, but we did have the open house at Fowler, and I think Fowler as well as CF Tigard got notifications.
Yeah, so we did include the information in the school newsletter and worked with the school, but I love the idea of getting the students more involved. So we're ending here at a 30% design, but we'll still need to finish the rest of the design process once we pick back up again. And so I think that would be great to get students involved, and any ideas that you have, we would love to take them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wolf?
Well, I'm certain that parents had a lot to say about those accessible parking spots. And so ditto to just great work. And as a commuter, unfortunately, more than a biker, that North Dakota merge, it's like the book of nevers is to get on that and have to make the left-hand turn, because it really can queue up in the morning. So really interesting and so relevant for the need. So my question, and Courtney, maybe this is more to you, so still relatively new to council in the process, and I appreciate cost impact being an important factor. So that comes back to us at that 60% or at a different point in terms of really understanding the total cost and how that rolls out? That was just my curiosity as I went through the slides. So.
Yeah, so we can share the cost. With the design up to the 30%, we now have a good cost estimate to actually construct and do the rest of the design for the project. And so we have the materials now at this point that we would need to, if we wanted to apply for grant funding, to be able to help get some more funding for the project. These are the things that we worked on, are the materials that are really expected when you apply for the grants, and also puts us in a good position just to mitigate the city's risk as far as going for external funding. We're very confident in the costs that we have, like all of the quantities are very precise to the design that was done, and so there was a lot of very detailed work that went into that. It wasn't just there's obviously the roadway elements, but we also looked at, with the project, we would replace the water line that's there because it's a lot older. And if you're gonna go to the effort of doing this kind of a big project, we would replace that as well. So we kind of looked at those types of things as well. So it was pretty comprehensive. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so if
Okay.
it's appropriate to share, it would be interesting to look at. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. As someone who used to drive it in the mornings, I am deeply familiar with all of these problems. And you're right, those parents would have a lot to say because they are queued up watching their kid walk into school. It's so incredibly needed because I would watch kids try to walk down where there isn't really a sidewalk or much of a bike lane or anything, just praying that these drivers are paying attention. I have a couple of questions. I am a fan of like the buffered bike lane and getting it off sharing the street. My concern though is I don't think students are going to have a problem necessarily not buzzing people walking, but cyclists are not always the most kind to anybody walking. So that multi-use path, is there like a differentiation between this is the area you bike and this is the area you walk? Because even like in Cook Park, right? Like it's just, I've had really unpleasant experience by some really rude cyclists.
Yeah, I believe I'll let you follow up, but I think we have enough width to have some differentiation?
Yeah, that's definitely the trade-offs with having a multi-use trail, is that blending of modes, because sometimes we hear a lot in these kinds of projects that people say, no, we need to keep them separate. In this corridor, though, there's tremendous support for keeping them together, mostly because it was, allowing kids to ride their bikes on street and provide that kind of trail-to-trail type feeling. There is enough width to potentially designate, pedestrians on one side, bikes on the other. When you do that, you traditionally will see the bike section striped as like one way. So we could keep the bikes on each side striped for like as if they were in the street, kind of going one way only, and then pedestrians can walk both directions. And I think we just decided that at this stage of the project, we didn't need to finalize that kind of design detail, how you would separate it, would you separate it. But there is space. 10 feet is kind of on the narrower side for having that division. But it's definitely possible. I mean, it would be like 5 feet and 5 feet. And I would definitely recommend at that width, having the bikes be one direction only. But that forces people to cross more, or you could might have people violating, particularly children, the one direction bike lane frequently. So I think it's definitely a design consideration to look at as the project moves forward.
Yeah, I think that's something to definitely talk about some more, but my preference is certainly to separate, because I think probably less problems in the day, but if we're making this much more friendly corridor, I expect in the neighborhood people making much more connections and walking a lot more, and hear complaints about people where there isn't a separation. Cyclists just not necessarily being the most kind. I just wanted to say, I know in your presentation you talked about just the one side and really not hoping to not do that. I just want to echo that. Please, let's do everything we can to not just do one side. I think that area really needs two sides. And then I have just kind of a general question. Huge fan of trees and the buffer and all of those sorts of things. What are things that we can do to mitigate? I mean, it looks great now, but 20, 30 years down the road when the sidewalks are buckling and we are creating ourselves a problem because of roots from trees and those sorts of things, what are things that we can do now to mitigate having to make repairs in the future because of things that our landscape is doing?
Yeah, do you want to answer that? I mean, I know it comes a lot down to the tree selection.
Yeah,
Learned a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's the biggest thing is the tree selection. And then there's also different design features with kind of how what's underneath and how it's staying contained or how it's not staying contained. Because, I mean, I completely agree. That's not what we want to be doing. And that is definitely an issue. There's that balance between having that, because it is nice to get that shade and the nice tree, canopy, that corridor. And I think there's obviously a lot of existing trees there. And so we want to keep kind of that same feel. But we will definitely need to be, and these are some of the things that we'll be looking at as the design progresses, is making sure that we're picking the right types of trees and that they're spaced the right way and that the design is, ensuring that it won't become an issue down the road.
Excellent. I just always am thinking future forward of trying to make sure that we're not going to have these sorts of issues. So thank you for looking into it. And I would be interested, in seeing the amount and maybe also seeing where in the CIP that we eventually think it may come through, just so we have a timing, because people may start to ask us, hey, when is this really great ideas? When are you going to start moving some dirt around? And so to be able to tell them the story of what the next steps are would be really helpful. Thank you. This is all good news. It's exciting. It's, a much needed corridor and very well used. So, any additional questions pop up for anybody else? No? Thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The original item 8, the Downtown Tigard Reimagined final report, is going to be rescheduled to July 16th meeting. I will open the public hearing for the Downtown Reimagined Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and I also request a motion to continue this item to a date and time certain of July 16th at 6:30 p.m.
Mayor, I'd move to continue the legislative public hearing to a date and time certain of July 16th, 2024 at 6:30 PM.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the city recorder please conduct a roll call vote?
Counselor Wolf,
Aye.
Council President Hu,
Yes.
Mayor Lube,
Yes.
Counselor Shaw.
Yes.
Thank you. The vote to continue the public hearing is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. Again, that is moved to July 16th at 6:30 p.m. Also, we will be moving the briefing on River Terrace 2.0 Community Plan Kickoff, which is going to move to June 11th council meeting. I apologize for these movements. Unfortunately, we just had some issues come up with an individual, and so we look forward to them feeling better and having them come back before us in the future. Is there any non-agenda items or anything else? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. We are adjourned. Good night, Tigard.